Hello, this is Conan Stoops and welcome back to another Lumion Legacy HTUC video, and today's video is on Searknight. Searknight as of right now is one of the best starters in today's metagame, specifically because of its versatility and matchup spread across the whole metagame. So why not talk about it? In today's video, we're going to be talking about how to use and counter Searknight, from the counters and checks and teammates in order to know how to use Searknight in your battles, as well as knowing the roles and sets it can actually play to build around Searknight. Today's video is all about how to use and counter Searknight. So in order to know how to use Searknight in your matches, you must know what type of role it's going to be playing, and your base stats and some parts of your move pool will help us answer that. First off, Searknight has some pretty bad speeds and range attack stat of 65 and 60 respectively, and I just want to mention this, Searknight's base stats really hasn't dated all that much. In my opinion, it actually has stayed pretty relevant, and when you compare this to other offensive Lumions or any type of Lumion in general that is released in the near future or modern era, this is all pretty similar to Searknight. So in terms of Searknight's base stats, for how old this really is, it's really all pretty good. Anyways, we do have a pretty good spread of HP, energy, and range defense, all being to the range of low 80 to high 80 in the spectrum. This is going to give Searknight a pretty good matchup against range attackers, whether or not they hit it super effectively, or whether or not they hit it neutrally. Searknight will usually always take a hit from them if invested or not invested, and this is a pretty good natural bulk to have. And of course, your energy of 88. This is a starter's energy stat, so Searknight will be able to use a lot of high base power and high energy costing type of moves. Other than that, it has pretty good melee attack and melee defense, which is the core part of Searknight. This makes Searknight really melee bulky, and along with its HP stat, this will make any type of Searknight pretty bulky on the melee defense side, and of course will be able to take a lot of melee hits very well. And your melee attack stat is nothing to scoff at, and this is on par with the level of Avatros and other Lumions like it that can't really hit hard without boosts. But thanks to Searknight's move pool of Drudge or Bulk Up, this melee attack stat will be able to go even higher. And just to go back to that bulk part, this bulk actually helps it a lot because of its defensive typing, resisting useful types such as Plant, Ancient, Mind, and Typeless. However, it does have its weaknesses, being Water, Electric, Brawler, and a major weakness to Earth. So as of right now, this is not really the greatest of defensive typings, but this defensive typing is definitely a really good something to have. Anyways, let's talk about its role now. Searknight can be playing an offensive or a defensive role on many teams because of its attacking stats and boosting moves, as well as its defensive typing and bulk, being able to play a jack of all trades type of Lumion on any team. While your Searknight is definitely going to be focusing on one type of set on any type of Searknight, the fact that Searknight can be ran on any type of set is ultimately very great. So with that out of the way, let's talk about Searknight's sets. So this is going to be the ranged focus set for Searknight. Now, I didn't mean range attack focus, I meant range defense focus. This set for Searknight will be utilizing Searknight's offensive and defensive capabilities to be a pretty good sponge and offensive Lumion that will be able to fit many type of roles on your team. This Searknight is going to be able to do pretty well against range attackers that Searknight can resist the coverage on, specifically against Lumions like Nova Diaz and Glaciadia and Chironix, and this will also be pretty helpful against melee attackers such as Nevermare. This Searknight is also going to be focused on more damage from its coverage and of course offensive utility and defensive utility with hazards and slapdown. Right off the bat, this Searknight is going to be using the ability Terrifying. Terrifying will let you get better matchups against Lumions such as Nevermare and will help you patch up your melee defense, which we aren't really investing into that much. Do note that your melee defense is still pretty high at this level, and it really isn't something to be worrying about, and you really want your clever personality to make you have better matchups against said range attackers. Anyways, the personality is going to be Brawny Clever. This is to increase our damage while increasing our weaker defense. so we can deal as much damage as we can while also helping our team by taking hits from specific range attackers. And as for the move pool, we're going to be utilizing Searing Steel and Boiling Press. This is going to be your main two moves for any type of Searknight set, simply because we want to run our 2 stabs so we can do as much damage as possible. Other than that, the rest of our moves are going to be Slap Down and Barbs. Barbs can be replaced over Drudge because on most teams having 2 hazard setters is a big waste, because while hazards is definitely useful for any type of Lumion because it can pressure the opponent into removing hazards, when you have a Lumion such as Gargoyle Defense or something else that sets up hazards better than Searknight, Searknight is really only a secondary option. So running Drudge on the set is perfectly fine, and if you want to replace Terrifying for Awakening, that is fine as well. Anyways, right onto the item. The item of choice is going to be Milkshake. Milkshake will help your Nevermare matches a lot more better because Nevermare usually will want to run the Rageful plushie, and if you accidentally proc that with Boiling Press, that is not good. So you want to try and expend a turn of using Slapdown against it, and if it does crit you, your Milkshake will bring you back to around 75 to full HP, which will help you get your matchup against Nevermare a lot more consistent. If your Milkshake is being used up by a cleaner or sweeper, I either suggest you putting Milkshake on Searknight and giving them an essence, or putting Health Amulet on Searknight. Other alternatives are Pearls, because while Searknight does have a pretty good energy stat, it really doesn't want to run any type of heavy items, so running a Wave or a Brawler Pearl or a Terror Pearl, those are fine as well. Other than that, let's get to the set. And the set will be utilizing 200 HP. This is so we can max out our bulk on our HP stat and help us tank melee defense and ranged defense hits a lot more consistently. Other than that, we do have 24 ranged defense, which is just the leftovers, and 48 speed is to outspeed a sluggish Stratosaur, if I recall, and a non-sluggish Cleone. This is pretty important because these Lumions can threaten us back, and we can determine whether or not a Stratosaur is a Soul Burst Stratosaur, because if the speed stat does not outspeed Strat, then of course it's Soul Burst. If the speed stat does outspeed Strat, or if this speed stat underspeed Strat, then Stratosaur is Soul Burst. If it does outspeed Stratosaur, then of course you're really gonna see that Stratosaur is defensive. Other than that, our energy is going to be utilizing for 2 Slapdowns, 2 Barbs, 2 Searing Steels, and I'm pretty sure the rest are Boiling Presses. And finally, the 200 melee attack to max out our melee attack and hit as hard as possible. Putting this melee attack into the ranged defense is fine, and then swapping the ranged defense TPs to melee attack is perfectly fine. I just prefer my TPs to be in this order. And yeah, with that out of the way, let's talk about the offensive counters and checks and defensive counters and checks, as well as Searknight's teammates. So offensive and defensive counters and checks are going to be talked about first. First off, offensive fighters are really good against Searknight, specifically Ikazune, Soulburst, Rotodon, and Volcaloa. They're all pretty good. With the exceptions of Arceus and Novidius, pretty much most fire types are going to be great against Searknight. Other than that, general fast Lumions that have the coverage to hit this super effectively, such as Zulong, Ferroglyph, Totab, Dakuda, and Halvansic, they're all good Lumions to stop Searknight. Other than that, defensive counters and checks are specifically, again, defensive fires. They're your best stops against Searknight. Paralin and Krakaloa and its Soul Burst form are the best answers, while as regular melee defense walls such as Obsidian, Ursnack, Golem defense, and Tundralin, they're all pretty good. Do note that Tundralin and Obsi, they do get hit super effectively by Searing Steel, so try and play around this as much as you can, and try and keep your HP above 50% just so you won't lose to Searknight. Other than that, offensive teammates are going to be talked about next, and offensive waters are really good. Stuff like Jalusa specifically is pretty good because it has really good matchups against defensive fires and has good matchups against melee defense walls such as Tundralin and Gargolem defense. Do note that it can't swap in on Body Crash at +1, so try and be careful of that. Other than that, general ranged wall breakers, specifically Odiaga for the body crash and Gargolem defense. Odiaga is just really good in of that role. A more general mind type of use is Ferroglyph as well. Glishady and Chironix, they're also good Lumians in that role as well. Glishady's case don't really want to swap in, but in Chironix's case, it pretty much takes advantage of pretty much every melee defense wall that I mentioned besides Ursnack, considerably because Ursnack can still pivot out with Baffle, or you can slap down the item, which is not always beneficial. And other than that, let's talk about the defensive cores. First off, I really recommend Searknight and a Gargolem defense pairing, because Gargolem defense takes care of most matchups against Searknight, specifically the Earth type matchup against Searknight. And while it doesn't really want to take water type hits, it certainly can, especially with the move Empathize, which is being ran more and more because Gargolem defense is just that bulky. Searknight as well is also playing a pretty good role in helping Gargolem defense because it takes out the ice types that Gargolem defense doesn't really want. Of course, this core is weak to Brawler and Plant, or not Plant, but Brawler mainly. So we can abuse Ursnack right here to patch up the weaknesses, and of course you can use other options that work. Searknight, Gasstroke, and Tundulin is also another core mainly focused on balance, which is mainly going to be comprised of these Lumians that can try and cover most of the metagame matchups. Tundulin covers most of the melee attackers besides Totab, so patching up this core with a Ursnack or a Obsidian, something like that, or a Barblast, that is also pretty good. Searknight and Gasstroke, very good synergy. Searknight just covers the ice weakness, and the Gasstroke covers Searknight's electric weakness, and this is just overall a pretty solid core. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the conclusion and my thoughts on Searknight. So overall, I think Searknight is a very good starter in this metagame. Searknight, along with some other starters like Valkyrie, Vesperatu, and Himber, they're all really close in liability. I feel like the 4 starters right there, they're so-called bottom 4, but the bottom 4 is really good. So it's really tough for me to say which one is better over the other. However, I still think that Searknight is a really good Lumian in this metagame, and is a Lumian that I'd consider using on your teams if you are needing a Lumian that can provide offensive and defensive pressure. So, what did you think of the video? If you find this informational, then of course like and subscribe. This is Cotton Stoops, signing off to remind you that Zulong is still a dumpster fire.